Welcome to Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR, the podcast where we elevate the stories of the plaintiff's bar and dive into the key trends shaping the civil justice system today. I'm your host, Ray DeLorenzi, and in each episode, we'll bring you insightful interviews with leading attorneys, expert perspectives on current legal events, and in-depth discussions on the issues that matter most. Now let's jump in.
Part of that competitive spirit in being an athlete makes me want to bring in the most from my firm every year. And if I have to work harder to do it, I'll do it. If I'm going to be able to do this, or if I want to do this, I got to be able to work hard too, and show people that I'm willing to have the fun of curling, but also take my job seriously.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR. I'm your host, Ray DeLorenzi, and today I'm honored to be joined by Rich Ruohonen of TSR Injury Law in Bloomington, Minnesota. Rich has been practicing plaintiff's lawyer for nearly 3 decades, focusing on traumatic brain injury, car accident, product liability, premises liability cases, an unbelievable success rate of trial, and over 80% success rate, and going into 2026 had won 27 consecutive trials. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about Rich's other career, in which he is a professional curler and just is back from representing the United States on the men's curling team in Milan Cortina. He was the oldest American to ever compete at the Winter Olympics, breaking a 94-year-old record. So with that, Rich Ruohonen, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Rich, we start these the same way, getting to know the person behind the lawyer and how you got into the law field. Of course, we're going to have to talk about the Olympics, but tell me, growing up in Minnesota, what that was like and what led you to having a career in the law.
You know, nobody in my family had ever been in the law. My dad was a teacher. My mom was worked in insurance. So but it wasn't like a family thing at all. I used to get a hard time from my parents saying I can win every argument and I should be a lawyer. And it was kind of a joke in our family. And then I just, frankly, once I got into college, I went to Hamline University undergrad, which is also a law school. And I think just kind of hanging around there, and there is a little bit of you have a lot of things going on the campus that deal with law and things like that. And I think it just sort of cultivated this thing that I wanted to help people and do something like that. At first, I felt like I'd love to be a sports agent. You got to be a lawyer to be a sports agent. Then I realized how tough it was to crack into that field just because I'm a big sports guy and, sports nut. So, and then I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to give it a whirl, go to law school, and went right from undergrad to law school at Hamline. They have a 6-year program, but I took the 7-year deal just so I could finish undergrad rather than do 3 and 3. And so, and I just got into it, and I happened to clerk for a personal injury firm in law school. And I kind of really liked the field. I liked how they help people. I'm sort of that kind of a guy, sort of the caretaker of the family. I was dealing with all the issues that you got to deal with, and it just became kind of a natural fit for me. And I got a job working with a personal injury firm then called Pritzker and Associates, and I became a partner there and became Pritzker and Ruohonen. And then in 2009, I went to we made TSR Injury Law, and I joined 2 of my friends at the time that were Terry and Slane, and became TSR Injury Law. So that's kind of how it went. And I've only been in 2 firms my entire life, and been here since 2009, so almost 17 years.
So you mentioned you're a bit of a sports nut, and I understand you picked up curling at age 10.
Yeah.
Before getting into curling, I know a little bit about Minnesota. It's my second home.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids grow up on the ice. Was curling kind of the first sport you got deeply involved in, or were you playing ice hockey and doing soccer, baseball, anything else, or was curling what you kind of got put into by your father, I understand?
Yeah, I played basketball at a young age, and it was kind of during the curling season too, in the winter here in Minnesota. So I was kind of split between it. So I didn't really get into more competitive curling until a little bit later. I played football for a few years too, till like I think my sophomore year in high school, and then I played tennis all the way through high school and into my first year in college. I played. Curling, there was a little bit of a time battle there when you're playing basketball too, and so but then when I stopped playing basketball, I got into curling more in my late teens, I would say, primarily, and then started playing more competitively when I got into college. But still, you have that, you're going to college full time. It's tough to be the kind of curler I was for the last 25 years. You know what I mean? Just not enough time, and you can only miss so many classes and things like that. So, just got into it pretty heavily. In a little bit in my college years, and then law school was a little tough to be a competitive curler. Took a step back for a little bit, graduated from law school in 96 and went to really my first men's national championship in 1998. And then really went at it hard after around 2000, started playing pretty hardcore. Lot more time, lot more time away from home and traveling, although it was different. Curling's kind of changed over the years. It's a way bigger time commitment to be one of the best teams in the world now than it was then, because now people are just specializing as professional curlers, as there is in every sport. So it's a lot tougher now to be that kind of to play at that level.
So going back, 30 years ago, you have this itch to take your curling to the next level and be a professional. But I assume it's not at the time, and maybe still today, wasn't like, I don't need a job. I can just be a curler and pay the bills. I assume that was very difficult. And also, you got to like pass the bar and be a lawyer. How did you balance those things? And what did that look like in actuality?
Yeah, well, it's hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't sleep a lot.
Well,
To play at this level, I mean, I can tell you back then it was a little less of a commitment. We just go throw rocks, which is practice. We call it throwing rocks. We practiced as much as we could, but we didn't have the other, there wasn't as much of the training, the weightlifting, the sports psychology piece was non-existent back then. The meetings that you had to have, you just got four guys, hopefully that lived kind of close to you, and you would go 6 weekends a year and then qualify for nationals, and if you win it, you get to go to the worlds. Now it's far different. It's I'm leaving my house at 5:15, 3 or 4 days a week, going to work out at 6, get done at 7:30, drive, and that's driving 30 miles to go work out. And then, because that's where our training facility is in Egan, and then, making it to work by 8, hopefully working a 10-hour day or whatever, coming home, hopefully grabbing something to eat, and then either curling at night or working more to get caught up for the next day because you're going to be gone. And a lot of our tournaments are we leave Wednesday nights, get back Sunday night or Monday, or we leave Thursday morning. Some are week longs. They're called the slams. They're the bigger ones, kind of like the golf, like the Masters and PGA. We have like 5 of those where the top 16 teams in the world play. And if you're in that realm, you play in those. But they're only 1 game days. So I spend a lot of my time working in hotel rooms. And of course, the one, I guess, okay thing about COVID was the courts really learned how to do this, what we're doing right now, which is, just having hearings electronically, on Zoom, things like that, which really wasn't allowed much when I first started. So, but I spend a lot of my every chance I have to do something, to that have an hour, I need to do it when I'm on the road. So I will return phone calls, return emails in between games, and work late at night and work on the weekends while, we might have a game at 8 a.m. and then not till 4. So we'll come back to our hotel room and I'll work for 4 hours to try to catch up on that, because it's not easy being a trial lawyer and a professional quote unquote curler. But the money is we're not in it for the money. If we can break even on a year, we're super happy. And we had a great year this year. I mean, we were one of the best teams in the country. We got to 6 in the world. We were the best team in the country. We got to 6 in the world. But we're spending, even though we won probably 60, 70,000 in prize money easily this year, we probably spent almost all of it. So, and that's a great year. So and also of course getting the Olympic team, we started to get some expenses paid after that, so that helped.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're playing it for the love of the sport, not because you want to get rich off it. And that's the biggest problem with curling right now, like around in the US, because around the world people are they get it paid for and we don't. So they'll have a salary. Now it's going to be less than you make as maybe a well-established personal injury lawyer, but a lot of those guys are making 75 to 100 a year, and their job is to work out in the morning, practice for 2, 3, 4 hours a day, and then watch film, and then they get to go home. So it's kind of their job, and then they get to keep whatever prize money they make. But it's hard to have a job and curl. You have to have really understanding people, bosses and stuff. But you also have to, like in my position, you just have to use every moment you can to catch up. And to make that you can play in a tournament and still work 50 hours a week. You just have to work at night sometimes and early in the mornings, and so I'm still able to do it. It's not super easy. I'll tell you that.
So you're out of law school and you're a baby lawyer. It sounds like the firm was supportive. They were understanding, like, hey, as long as you get the work done, you can pursue this curling thing. I mean, did they view it as like, what are you doing? I mean, what was like the sort of like, when you're younger and, trying to be like an up and coming lawyer?
Well, I would say when I started I passed the bar in November of '96 and started with Pritzker and Associates. Then, back then there was about 3 years where I wasn't curling much. I mean, back then as a first year lawyer, you were expected to be there before your boss got there and be there after your boss got there. So I was working a lot of 12-hour days. I was traveling all over the country doing some litigation. We did a lot of food poisoning cases around the country and some products cases. And so, although most of my stuff was in Minnesota, I probably spent 20% of my time traveling. And so that was kind of hard, and I wasn't quite curling as competitively then. I'd play a few weekends, we'd be able to work it out. And of course, the weeks I was there, when you didn't have an event, I might work 70 hours, 80 hours a week to get caught up. Because back then there wasn't this kind of balance of family life. And I mean, I think we all I mean, we say, we walked through 3 feet of snow and uphill both ways to school, right? It's that whole thing, but it's true. Back then there wasn't this balance. You were expected to be there, and so it was tough. I think when I was playing in the early 2000s, I just made sure that every waking moment where I wasn't curling or with my family, I was figuring out work situations. And also having success helps. If you're bringing in as much money as the senior partner or more, um, it's hard for them to say that they're mad that you're not there when you are gone, right? Because that's when I work. Part of that competitive spirit in being an athlete makes me want to bring in the most from my firm every year. And if I have to work harder to do it, I'll do it. And I think I've been pretty successful in doing that. I'm usually the one who has the most money in our firm and any firm I've worked in, so, the two. So it's hard for people to complain when you're doing that too. So that makes a difference, and it's part of that competitive spirit, right? Like I'm like, hey, if I'm going to be able to do this, or if I want to do this, I got to be able to work hard too, and show people that I'm willing to have the fun of curling, but also take my job seriously.
So at this point in your career, how many cases have you tried?
I think I've tried around 90. I don't have the exact count. I was
Fair enough.
really keeping track for a while, but I think I've tried around 90 cases or so.
Take me back to the first case you tried. That was yours.
My first case that I did alone. So my
Yeah.
first
Like,
my
yeah.
first case that I tried with my senior partner, and we got a couple $1 million verdict. But then my second case was a case where um, it was a soft tissue case, chiropractic only. And I had a lady who was a house cleaner, really nice woman. And the judge that I had was an old school judge and couldn't believe that I was bringing this case in. And he's the kind of guy that I remember I thought, okay, I did this really good job of objecting during these doctor stepos, and he's going to rule for me on all of them. And he said, Mr. Ruohonen, do you want me to rule on these objections? Hand me the transcript. So we're in his chambers, and I say, okay, here you go, judge. And he goes flips, just flips in 1 second, goes, they're all overruled. If you can't get around an objection as a lawyer, then you have no business being a lawyer. And I just said, okay, I guess that's how we're gonna do it. And he gave the other side just as much of a hard time. He was like, Rich's boss, Fred, he's got him coming in on the helmet strapped on a kamikaze mission. He has no way to win this case. Those were his exact words. And if that thing you have sitting on your wall, if you lose this case to Rich, you might as well take that thing you call a JD and throw it in the garbage because it's worthless. And I mean, this is the kind of judge he was. And he was a good judge, but he just believed I'm going to let you try your case. You got to get around objections. And frankly, that was a pretty scary moment as a first trial for a young lawyer. And I don't know, it was like a $30,000 verdict, which on a soft tissue chiro case back then was seen as like a huge win, right? Even though it wasn't much money when it really came down to it. And, so that was my first trial. And then, my second trial was very similar, lost that one, had lots of problems. So it was, and then, you just start moving your way up, trying a little bit bigger cases. And at one point, I think I tried 12 maybe cases in an 18-month period, and that was pretty rough, even though most of them were small. But that's where you really start to learn and start to really get a handle on, what these arguments just come to your head when you're sitting there. Oh, I can say this again. And it starts to flow more naturally, and you can recycle a lot of these arguments as you're in the trial or in your closing, and you start to that light bulb kind of goes off in your head, I think.
Tell me about being a professional athlete and how that are there parallels in the preparation for a curling match? I don't know if match is the right word.
Yeah,
Hopefully it is.
game.
And for a trial, that do you think one has benefited the other, or you sort of view them as two different kind of separate parts of your brain?
Actually, you know what? That's a great question because I've talked about this before, and there is no question that being an athlete has I've learned being an athlete has helped me be a lawyer and vice versa. And I can give many examples. I mean, first of all, like in curling, like I told you back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we just practiced. We thought practicing was enough. And the weird part about lawyers is they don't practice. I can't believe it. I still can't believe it to this day. Me being an athlete, that's all I wanted to do is go out and throw so I can go to the Olympics, right? Go out and practice 2 hours a day, whatever, whenever you can. Any waking moment you have an hour. Was as lawyers, most people walk in and give a closing argument or especially an opening without ever practicing it. So what I brought into our firm was we call it Fight Club. You give your opening statement to 20 people in our firm, and you aren't going to trial unless you do that. And then they don't tell you what was great about it. They tell you what was bad about it. That's why we call it Fight Club. And you go back and make changes and then usually give it to a couple more people. And I practice every opening, sometimes to the wall, but usually to my family. I've done it to neighbors, always in my firm at least once. And usually I'll go back that night. I'll make all the changes that were suggested and I'll practice it again. And that is something that I don't think lawyers do very often. And I don't understand why, because how do you get better? How do you know? Like sometimes we have the curse of knowledge as lawyers and we just don't, we think we know our case and then something is just no big deal and we think it's a huge deal, or we didn't explain something well enough in our opening. So we have tons of great ideas coming from our staff, who listens to it. All of our paralegals and admin people, they do a great job of saying, "Well, I didn't really understand this. Why did you say this? This doesn't make sense. Why don't you do this or that?" And then you amend it and you give it again, and then you're ready maybe 2 or 3 times. So that's a big parallel. I also would say in I've always thought about juror psychology since I've been a lawyer and trying to read jurors and figure out, but in curling or in sports, really, sports psychology didn't really come into play until after 2010. Not big, not at the level that I think it is at now and how important it is. And I had always thought about, you know, um, juror psychology and how do I pick the right jury and how do I talk to them. And I've read a lot of books on it and thought about it and really revise how I do voir dire and things like that, and how I talk. in a trial, but I didn't really realize that how I talked to my teammate without berating him, but just saying things like, "Oh, this is an easy shot." To someone that might be fine, but to some people they think, "Oh my God, it's easy. I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna miss. If I miss, they're gonna be mad at me." Just things like that is so big on how you talk to people. And both of those now I use, they kind of overlap with each other. And I really believe how you say things to juries and what you say and how you say them matter. How you uh I can give you an example. If I say, don't think about a purple elephant, no matter what, right now, don't think about a purple elephant, you're going to think about a purple elephant. The way our mind works is if we say something negative, you have to think about that before you cannot think about it. And so when we're in curling, I don't say, don't be heavy, don't throw it too hard. I say it's okay to be light, right? It's okay if you're short, because you're giving them that positive thought. If I'm in a trial, I don't say, um, my client didn't run the red light. I say, my client, Mrs. Jones, had a green light. Mr. Johnson over here, he says he didn't run the red light. And I guarantee you they picture my client having a green light and their client running through a red light. So I'm already ahead. So that's like how you talk to a jury and what you say to them. It really does matter. And so I really try to be cognizant of that. And there's numerous examples like that. And I also think just the general, you know, we have week-long competitions where you're tired and the grind and you have roller coasters and you win two in a row, but then you drop one to a team you shouldn't and you're down and you got to get out of the dumps and come back and win the next day. And, I remember one time in Worlds in 2018, we lost I think it was 4 or 5 in a row, and we had to win our last five. And I just said, today's a new day. We don't quit. And we won 5 in a row to qualify for the playoffs, including beating the number one team in the world on the last night from Canada. And so it's kind of that way with a trial, right? You're tired a lot. You're working 16, 18-hour days. You're in court for 10 hours, and then you spend 3 hours kind of getting ready for the next day's cross or directs or whatever, preparing witnesses, and you go right back at it, and you got a week-long trial, and it's a roller coaster. You feel great one day, and the next day you're like, we're going to lose. So all of those, and I could go on forever, but those are just some of the parallels that I see between the two. And I think being an athlete helps me be a lawyer and vice versa for sure, because I've learned so much from just talking to people the way you're supposed to talk to people, and really getting to read people too. And I think it's definitely, I think, made a huge difference in my success.
There's a saying, if some trial lawyer says, I've never lost a case, then they haven't tried enough.
Hmm.
You, on the other hand, you said tried over 90, and you had a 27 consecutive
Hmm.
streak going in
I'm still
2026.
on it. I lost my last case in 2000, I think 11 or 12.
What do you
So
attribute to that? I mean, is it partly like, luck of the draw? I mean, but that 27 is such a massive number.
mhm,
What? And I assume there's a bunch of different factors there, but
yeah.
what do you think's led to it?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't get a little lucky, because I had some bad cases or cases that I wasn't sure I was going to win. But I think part of it is I believe I can win. You got to settle the ones that you don't think you're going to win. Not that I haven't tried any bad ones either, because I have cases that with 3 prior accidents where you're going, geez, I don't have any chance to win this. But you've got to convince yourself that you can win, because the jury will see it if you don't believe it. I do think a big factor is I'm willing to say what I think needs to be said. And I think people are scared they're going to offend a jury. I will call the jury out and I will say, this is your job. You don't have to believe you. I mean, the people who didn't believe in pain and suffering, they're gone from this jury. Remember that guy that said it in voir dire? He said he didn't believe. So if someone in that jury room says, hey, I just don't believe in pain and suffering, you got to remind them that they should have been honest at the beginning. So what does that do? That stops that guy who was going to say it, didn't say it in voir dire, but it's going to say it now. Now he won't say it. You have to remind them that they lied then, and they shouldn't be on this jury. And all of you said you could do it, and it's your job. Now, it's not easy, and here's some ways you should do it. I also think just doing things like people just don't think of sometimes. I think this is totally a made up statistic, but I think at least 50% of the people hate needles. If I have a case where someone's got injections, I bring that needle into trial and have the doctor say, "Hey, this is the kind of needle that you use. Hold it up." And then I stand in front of the jury and hold it to them because you know what? I see people cower, and I know people that are so scared of needles, including one of my partners, right? I don't think he could hold it up in front of a jury. And I just think those kind of things are things that people just take for granted, saying, oh, there's an injection. How about if they actually see what is shoved into your client's spine? Those are just examples. Like I'm willing to try things that other people haven't tried, um, and to see if it works. I don't want to give away all my secrets on here, and you have to come to a plaintiff's, an MAJ, a Minnesota Association for Justice meeting or something. But those are things that I think you have to be willing to try things that other people haven't tried, and then and try some things that people have tried with success. I mean, I rip off stuff from other lawyers all the time, and I give them credit when I'll be like, hey, I got this argument from Keith Mitnick, who's awesome. I love his book, Don't Eat the Bruises, and his second one on those issues. And I use a lot of that. I change it a little bit, but it's about trying to just talk to people like reasonable human beings, talk to these jurors, and then use the little tricks of the trade to help convince them too, which sometimes they don't know that you're doing, obviously. But you need to be able to. I have so many people that are just afraid to call them out on like you have to award it. It's your job. And I'll say a lot of times if people say this in the jury room, you got to remind them that this is what the law says. It's those kind of arguments I think that really make a difference. And the willingness to say, you know, to do what you think maybe nobody else is willing to do. I remember when I tried this case, I was like, I had talked to a guy in Chicago, a lawyer in Chicago, and I was going to demand 10 million on this case. And he said, why not 20 million? And I was like, I don't think we can get that in Minnesota. This is 15 years ago. And then when we came down to that trial, I convinced myself that 20 million was the number and the jury verdict was 13. So if I had asked for 10, that would have been horrible. And there's another case where I gave my opening statement 13 times to people because it was that big of a case and that's how important it was. And I remember giving it a week before trial after I'd given it 10 times and my partner says, that sucks. And I went, what? And I wanted to cry. And then we just changed a couple words and he was like, now it's really good. And I go, okay, I got it. All right. It was just literally like that close, right? But that's the kind of stuff that I think you have to have that dedication and be willing, especially, on any case, but 13 times on that big case, or maybe I don't win. And I remember sitting down after I got in the middle of that opening statement. It was a kid who was sexually abused by another kid at a daycare, and he picked him up and brought him into this play gym area to assault him. And I bent down and picked up the kid just like he did, and one of the jurors got out of their chair and stared in my arms. And I went back after that closing and I said, it's over. It's going to be at least 10 million. I told my partner, and we still had 2 weeks of trial left. I was that convinced that I had them all there. It was over. And I don't get that if I don't practice 13 times. And maybe if I'm not the athlete who believes in practicing 13 times to get to that day. So that kind of stuff matters, how much you try it. And even visualization stuff I use as an athlete, I sometimes use as a lawyer the day before or going into my closing or going into my opening, that I can visualize what I'm going to say and I'm going to convince these people. So those are all things that I could go on and on. There's so many
Yeah.
parallels. There's so many parallels.
So you had 8 failed trial bids for the Olympics.
Mhm.
That's a lot, and you kept
Yeah.
going at it.
Yeah.
Tell me about the feeling when you got the call that like, hey, you're going to Milan or Cortina to compete.
Yeah, so we this year what happened was I actually came out of retirement to help a team where a bunch of guys in their 24 to 27 kind of age range about a year and a half ago. One of them had Guillain-Barré syndrome, so he was having a lot of nerve problems and pain and stuff. And so I came out of retirement to help these guys, and I played a lot the first year, played like 70% of the games because of his condition, but he got better, which is what I wanted. I was there more to, fill in when he couldn't, but early on it was a lot. And this past year, starting in the August of 25 here, he was doing a lot better. So I played a lot less, probably played only 20% of our games, 15%. It was more just to make sure I was getting in there and getting that experience in case something were to happen to him. And we won the Olympic trials in November of last year in 2025. But the problem was, by the way, the year before, we lost the national championship on last shot, and the team who beat us didn't do well at Worlds. So weren't, even though we won the Olympic trials, and even though every other year where I took second or I took third, I would have been automatically in the Olympics, we had to go win another event called the OQE, which is the Olympic qualification event, in December. And so I always said the only thing worse about not having multiple second and third places and stuff like that would be to actually win the trials for once and then not go to the Olympics. So I want to talk about pressure, and it wasn't pressure for me so much because the guy who had the medical issues was doing a lot better, Danny, and I was there more of a mentor, alternate in case something went wrong, and because 40 years of knowledge, curling matters and it's huge. And so we have a coach, but I was sort of also a coach slash fifth man, and there's a lot of stuff I could go into forever that we do behind the scenes. But to actually win that OQE with my wife there, my kids couldn't come because they were at the trials and they go to school, but they were going to come to the Olympics. So to actually uh, when it was one of the greatest moments of my life, if not the greatest. My wife was there. It was just a phenomenal thing after all the years, and you can't help but get emotional just talking about it because I knew finally, in whatever role it was going to be, I'm going to be there. And then to have them there when I got in to play at the Olympics to become the oldest U.S. Winter Olympian ever, it was just the greatest. Hearing them going nuts, and you come out and you get to throw a few shots, and I know all the guys there. In fact, I know most of their dads that were coaching them now, or, older guys, their coaches, if they weren't their dad, most of them weren't their dads, but they're guys that I played against, 20 years ago. And they're now coaches wondering what the heck is this 55-year-old guy doing out here, but they know me and they know how competitive I am, that I play. I want, that was my dream. So it was just, it was truly unbelievable. It was the best moment of my life to have my kids there with my wife, and just hearing them going wild in the crowd as you're playing, and the crowd knew it too. There was a lot of people there that are really good fans, and they knew what was happening, and they knew the record was being broken, and it was just such a great experience.
You mentioned, as part of your trial practice with a jury, saying things that you'll go places that often are unsaid. And I want to talk about, you gave a press conference
Hmm.
uh, at the Olympics in which you spoke about what was happening in Minnesota, specifically with ICE and unlawfully detaining and, shooting people, and, awful things going on, again, in a place that is my second home. What I'd be curious, did you talk about that with your teammates, and did you fear also the backlash that could result even from, like, the president of the United States, who isn't afraid to go on Truth Social or wherever and he was attacking, some Olympians for speaking out. So I want to know, you know, did you have any doubts, second thoughts, or you were all in on it?
Um, Well, I can tell you about it. I was all in on it for sure going into it. I was a little concerned that it would be a distraction, but I thought it would be a distraction either way because we were going to get asked. And as I told you, I'm playing with, I call them kids, 24 to 27-year-olds, right? And their job isn't to speak for a living. And, you just never, they would have felt extreme pressure. And we talked about it. We were training for 10 days, partly in Switzerland and partly in Italy. While we were at the village, we would go to a curling club that's an hour and a half away and throw to get ready for the first few days when we were there. So we were ready to play. So we didn't have 5 days without practicing, and we talked about it, and we talked about it with the women's team as well. Because we were all starting on the same day and we knew we were going to be asked, and everybody agreed that I needed to be the one to say it, and that we all were 100% behind saying it, because we knew if they didn't ask it at that first press conference the day before we start practicing and playing, we had our first games the next day that night, that it was going to be as we're going through this media zone. And most people don't know, but there's there could be 50 cameras with different stations, and you have to stop at each one that wants you to stop. You have to. You walk through it and they tell you to stop, whether it's CNN or ABC or NBC or whatever. And so we knew we were going to get asked it, and we all agreed we needed to say something. As Minnesotans, we can't ignore what was happening. We were all 100% behind it. And the other thing is that, we get a lot of I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised when you tell them. We get a lot of negative things just about being an athlete, or especially the women. They get comments about their bodies. They get comments about, you just had a baby, why aren't you at home in the kitchen? And I'm telling you, this kind of stuff happens every day to these guys. And I thought, I've known that the women's team since, I'm a little bit older than them, kind of a lot actually, but I've known them since they were kids, and I know their parents, and I thought I could take the brunt of it, because we knew there was going to be backlash. I knew there'd be some threats. I had some death threats, and things like that after talking. And so I felt like I was the one that could deal with it the best. And also, because I was the alternate, it's less of a distraction if I'm dealing with it versus them. And I think if we say something, we can deal with it now, and then hopefully, it won't be as big of a deal during the week, because it can be a distraction, right? And so I didn't really prepare anything. I had a couple of notes. I said, thank your family, and we love the USA, because we do. We love the USA, and we love the flag and what it's supposed to represent. We are Team USA. We love playing for Team USA, but we're not playing for people that don't uh, have the same values we do, and don't believe in empathy and compassion, and the rule of law. And as lawyers, we also have an obligation to speak out on the rule of law, I think. I mean, I can't believe more people haven't. There's a lot of lawyers in Congress right now, and they're just being quiet about what's going on. And I mean, to me, it's absolutely ridiculous. So I felt strong that I wanted to say something. And frankly, I don't care what happened afterwards. I did get some death threats. I did get a lot of comments like, your wife and daughter should be raped, and things like that. And I don't. And when JD Vance the day after said, if you're an athlete and you're going to speak out, you deserve to expect, or you should expect backlash. And then a minute later, I started getting emails again. They had slowed down. And I mean, it's like he was telling his cronies to give this guy some crap. And I just dealt with it. It's fine. But I think that any reasonable administration would have said, you know what, we have freedom of speech, and I don't have to agree with what Rich Ruohonen said, but he has the right to say it. And that's what's great about our country, because I can guarantee you that's what most administrations would say, no matter from the last 20 years,
Yeah.
other than 8 years ago. But you know what I mean? So when he was in the first administration. So I was like, I had hoped Trump would Truth Social at me like he did a couple of the athletes. I would have taken it as an honor. I was kind of disappointed, but then a day later, or 2 days after I spoke, they said they were pulling ice out of Minnesota, not fully, but you know what I mean. The surge was gone, and they asked me, I got stopped in the media zone a couple of times and said, why do you think that happened? And I said, I'd like to think it had something to do with what I said and what other athletes said. So I try to take the credit for our athletes for speaking out, because I do think it matters. I do think it makes a big difference. And it's not, free speech isn't free if it has to be in our locker room, because that's what JD Vance wants, right? He doesn't want it out in society for people to hear it. And I don't care who's saying it. If I don't agree with it, that's what's great about our country. We're not getting locked up for saying stuff, although apparently we are now. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. it's not. And what was happening in Minnesota was wrong. It was black and white. There were no shades of gray, just like I said. And I think we're seeing that now because I mean, it's definitely gotten better. It's not perfect in Minnesota. There's still stuff going on every weekend. But it's far better than it was. And so I think as lawyers, we do have a duty to do this kind of stuff, to speak out and I don't care what side you're on. When things aren't being followed, when the rule of law isn't being followed and the Constitution isn't being followed, we should be speaking out. And I'm stunned that it's not happening more.
Rich, you've been very generous with your time. I want to end with asking, obviously you're back home from the Olympics. What has, we'll call it your newfound fame, meant for your law firm? Has it changed how, individuals who have been injured are calling you because of your, celebrity status? I mean, and what's next for you?
Well, I definitely think that it has brought a lot of attention to our firm, most of it good, 90% of it. We did have the same kind of threats come through our emails and our website and stuff. But overall, it's been great. We've had people call and just say, hey, thank you for speaking out. I've gotten lots of emails. If I ever need you, I'm going to call you. Don't worry. I'm telling everybody about you. And I think we definitely have gotten some cases out of it, no question. Just that people that, want to work with a lawyer who does have compassion and empathy, because I think you have to have it to be, especially a plaintiff's lawyer, right? You have to understand what other people are going through. So it has been good. I mean, I've been on multiple podcasts. I've been interviewed in local papers and even on the news a couple times since, and about what had happened and my adventure there too. Just being, some people just like the fact that your lawyer's an athlete, and made the Olympics. And I don't tell my clients that very often, but I've probably had half my clients call me or text me and say, I saw you. That's awesome. So it's been great. For me, next, I go to the Senior World Championship in 2 weeks in Geneva, Switzerland. So I'm the only guy to ever go to the Olympics and the Senior World Championship, other than as a coach. Some guys have, but so that's kind of cool. So I'm playing. We took second in the world and third in the world the last two years for that. So and then I got to decide. I think at 55, my curling career, from a standpoint of playing at an Olympic level, is, there's a point where it slips off, and I feel like I can throw them as good as I used to, but it's harder every day. So I really have to make a decision. And do I stay on with these guys as their fifth? And I think they probably could look a little younger now. And Danny's better. So, but they're like my best friends too. So part of it is I would miss them a lot. So I got a lot to think about after I get back from the Olympics. Do I want to try to go another year or two? And in that support role, it is also more difficult because I also got to work a little bit, and I'd like to take a couple of fun vacations with my family rather than, no offense, most of the places we go to in curling are like in Canada, cold in the winter. It's not that fun all the time when you're in, no offense, but Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and it's freezing and 20 below and ice storm, blizzard, I should say. So I got to make up my mind on that, but I want to work a few more years. I want to, try a few more cases. And right now it's hard to get into trial sometimes and part of that is a factor of being successful and winning too, because they know which lawyers are going to try cases, right? But I'm looking forward to finishing out my career in the next 5 or 6 years. I'm hoping, and retire and maybe do some coaching. I'd love to do some coaching. I'd love to go back to the Olympics as a coach. It was truly just such a great atmosphere, such a great place, and the athletes are all wonderful, and they don't hold anything against us from being from the U.S. And in fact, I got so many compliments on what I did say in that press conference from other athletes around the world. It was really kind of a really fun group, and just people care around the world. They really do. And they want everybody to be successful, and they want our country to be what it's supposed to be, because I think they love the U.S. too.
With that, Rich Ruohonen of TSR Injury Law in Bloomington, Minnesota, and U.S. Olympian. Thanks so much for joining the podcast today. It's been an honor. Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Raising the Bar with Rebuttal PR. Don't forget to subscribe and follow to join us next time. See you then.